How do you learn to like yourself and be authentically you when you have been taught all your life that your difference and your authenticity is not only not good enough, but I will reject it and I will make you feel really crappy about it? Let's get into it. I'm somebody who, as a triple minority, I'm somebody who is a brown female and I have late diagnosed autism as well as suspected narcolepsy. And I have spent my whole life up against it, up against people who make me feel really shit about being me. They invalidate me. They find any excuse to dislike me. They look at my difference as a problem. And I would have previously believed that I just have to gain their approval. I have to eventually do enough code switching, enough masking, enough changing of me in order to eventually be welcomed into that community of people. And the truth is, that isn't the way that it works. And I don't know how many people know this, but I've gone on a journey of previously doing a lot of that into saying, do you know what? How about you could be wrong? And how about I fill in all the cracks in my self-concept? How about I get to know myself so well that nobody gets to tell me the truth about me, and I become susceptible into believing that. I think that it's one of those things that when we're young and we don't have all our self-concept filled in yet, because we're growing and we're evolving and we're becoming something, and we're moving from childhood into teenagers into adulthood, and there's naturally a lot of change that goes on in that, and a lot of development that goes on inside of that. When somebody comes along and they tell us, if we are somebody who is different, and they tell us that's not good enough, and they say to us, you should really probably not do that. That's not likable, that's not desirable, that's not something that you will be accepted on. We begin to turn on ourselves. We begin to dislike ourselves. As Selena Gomez says in that song, I had to learn to hate you in order to love me. I think that is such a powerful message, because obviously she's talking about romantic relationships, but I think it's really difficult to love yourself when you are basically trying to win the approval of somebody who is telling you that they don't love you, and everything in their behaviour is telling you that you're not enough. The natural response to anybody in a survival state would be to turn on self. And I'm going to tell you that once you know that that is not the way to do it, you can begin to do something with it. I think that we take parts of ourselves, we throw them away, or we bury them down deep, or we try to hide them and pretend they're not there. And we think that in doing that, we will gain the approval of people who are not our people. The truth is, you cannot like yourself whilst you're pretending to be something that you're not. For as long as you're code switching, for as long as you're masking, for as long as you're exchanging a part of yourself, hiding it, burying it, running away from it, presenting it as something different in exchange for the acceptance of people who are clearly not for you because they're asking you to be different and they're asking you to not be your authentic self, you are never going to find happiness there. When we see that somebody else shows you that it's possible to do it, it gives us the power and the strength to believe it's possible and to step forward despite the fear and make that happen for us. And then once it's happened and it's possible for one person, we see this is so much in history, when one person shows you that it's possible, so many more people come forward, believe in themselves, and then it becomes possible for them too. I read an extract from Michelle Obama, and I don't think she even necessarily realised just how widespread this message and some of the other messages that I've turned over could be. But something that she puts here is, the challenge is to shift our perspective and celebrate the value of differentness in ourselves and in others, seeing it as a reason to step forward rather than step back, to stand up rather than sit down, to say more rather than say less. The work is challenging. It often requires boldness, and there is never any guarantees on how it will be received. That's key. But every time somebody pulls it off, every time another tightrope is crossed, we see even more perspectives being shifted. It matters when a pregnant Asian American comic makes millions of people laugh. It matters when a 22-year-old black woman stands up and almost single-handedly resets the mood of a nation. It matters when someone who is Muslim becomes a CEO, or somebody who is trans becomes a class president. It matters when we feel safe enough to show ourselves without shame and find ways to speak openly of the experiences that made us into the people that we are. All these stories widen the view on what's possible, and they also sharpen our understanding of the component parts of being human. And for me, it reminds me that becoming empowered, moving into a place where I have more self-esteem than I ever did previously, and liking myself and being authentic is not because I gained the things that I originally thought would be the reasons that I would be able to do that, but it's despite those things, and to hopefully encourage some other people to do that for themselves too. Here are 3 things that you can do any moment you decide that it's important enough to you to begin to learn to truly like yourself in your authenticity. First, understand that authenticity is so powerful. Have you ever been around somebody who is so refreshingly okay with themselves, even if it is different to you, that they show themselves in their entirety and they don't need the approval of somebody else to do that? And tell me that that is not the most captivating, pulling, energetical experience to be around. Although I don't have all the words to describe what is happening in that moment, I know the way that it feels. And in finding people, whether it's on YouTube or whether it is in your family or in your friendship group or just somebody, even in the media, who is so refreshingly authentic in who they are, and ideally in something that you want to become more authentically yourself in, start to surround yourself with that. Start to fill your environment with that. Environment is so important to where you will end up. It's that famous saying, show me the 5 people closest to you and I'll show you your future. There was a study done, I think he's called Gary Brecker, and I might have mentioned it in a previous video, but he talks about how in a Faraday's cage, when 25,000 people were studied being in this, the most high vibrating frequency and energy to be emitted from inside the human body was authenticity. So find those authentic people. Find somebody who you can see the benefits of representation and authenticity. Number 2, begin to accept and meet all parts of you before anybody else can. Because if somebody comes along and decides for you and you've not filled in that gap, then they're filling in that gap. And you're going to have so many question marks around who you are and how you feel about yourself. Do the work. Fill in those gaps yourself. Take care of every single aspect of you so that nobody else gets to. And if they do, it's because you've decided that they get to. You've decided that you want to welcome that in. The third thing that I think is so valid and so important, and it has to be done. This has to be done. Understand that you are not going to be accepted of everybody. You're not made to be everybody's. Rejection will happen, and it might happen at more disproportional rate than the average person. I know that's true for me. I'm not accepted of everybody. I get strange looks in the street. I get people who perceive me when I interact with them off. I have people who just don't like the way that I look. That decides nothing about me. And the moment that you basically get comfortable with the idea that rejection is uncomfortable, and it's going to happen. And even the people who have so much acceptance, they will still have this. But you might have it to whatever rate you have it to, because I don't know you and I don't know your personal experience, but that it shouldn't get to decide anything about you, because that person who comes along and decides that they don't like you or they don't accept that part of you knows very little about you in comparison to you. And if you like you, and if the people who are meant for you like you, then why would we let somebody who isn't our sort of person influence us, take up so much of our headspace, and decide who we are, and decide what we are going to do in response to ourselves, and fill in those gaps in our self-concept. So, that being said, it is completely possible, I am living proof of it, that it is possible to like yourself against the odds. It is possible to like yourself even if you have spent a lifetime being rejected. It is possible for you to fill yourself up from the inside, and then that becomes, I want to use the word armor, but I feel like armor makes it seem like you're protecting yourself, like you have to. But in filling yourself up from the inside, it becomes almost a buffer to anything that is false coming in. Because the truth is, right, most opinions are subjective. It is not a valid ground for anything, because that opinion can differ from person to person. And it would be so unfair for you to invalidate yourself, change the way that you feel about yourself, base so much of yourself and your identity on falsehood based off something subjective. When if you go to someone different, they're going to tell you something different. And this is the importance of community and the environment that you surround yourself with. If it was factual and objective, and the outcome of it was always the same, I get it. And I know that if you've had a lifetime of rejection, you think that actually the outcome is always the same. But the truth is that if it's based off opinion, it is not objective. It is subjective. So you get to mold that however you want. But the truth is that you know yourself best. And the only way you will truly be happy is being authentically you and showing up in your entirety so that you can have authentic connection and feel comfortable in being you. But you don't do that from the outside in. You do that from the inside out. I hope this has been helpful. I feel like there's lots of tangents, and maybe I'm hoping that the message was clear enough. What do you believe about the power of being authentic despite your differences? I would love to hear your thoughts.